Mr. President, at the outset, we thank ASG Msuya and Deputy Special Coordinator Al-Akbarov for their sobering briefings. We listened attentively to Ms. Ashing and Ms. Gryziewski, who brought to this Council the perspective of human suffering. For Algeria, this is not an abstract debate. Our compass points in one direction, and one direction only toward morality and legality, and also empathy toward all those who are suffering. We call, and we will continue to call for an immediate and conditional and permanent ceasefire, the only condition that can end the agony of Gaza. An agony born from the Israeli occupying power's deliberate policy of killing, of destruction, and annihilation. Policy shielded by impunity and immunity. Let us be clear. Had Israel respected the ceasefire agreement brokered by Qatar, Egypt, and the United States, all hostage, all captive, all detainees would have reunited with their families, including your partner, Natan. Today, instead of embraces, there is only mourning and despair. Mr. President, the topic of today's debate is the Palestinian question. But today, I will not speak of the illegal settlement activities that fragment the West Bank into North and South and isolate Jerusalem from the West Bank. I will not speak of dispossession and annexation of Palestinian land. I will not speak of inflammatory rhetoric and actions that threaten the sanctity of Al-Aqsa Mosque. I will not speak of the continued erosion of the two-state solution. I will focus on the suffering in Gaza that has reached a level of barbarity that defies imagination. As the Secretary General reminded us, just when it seems there are no words left to describe the living hell in Gaza, a new one has been added. Famine. Yes, famine. A man-made famine. We have been warning of it. Now, famine is confirmed by the IPC. Famine is no more a fear, it is a reality. And it will expand by September if nothing is done by the international community, by this very Security Council. Famine cannot be hidden anymore behind manipulated figures and misleading claims of aid. Famine cannot be addressed through restricted access or token and impactless airdrops. Airdrops conducted only to soothe the conscience. Famine. Famine is the shame that will haunt all of us, all who could act and choose silence. But famine, Mr. President, is not only a word in a report. It has faces. It has names. It has stolen dreams. Famine affects human beings and their dignity. Famine consumes the innocence of childhood. Famine burdens the strength of fatherhood. Famine extinguishes the essence of motherhood. Famine drives humanity to its very limits. Pardon, President. Allow me to remind the Council. Yahya al-Najjar, 3-month-old, starved to death. His mother, words cut deeper than any statistic. I quote, "He survived his last 4 days only on water infused with an ice, because no milk, no baby formula was available." Yazan Abu Ful, 2-year-old. He is still alive. He stands shirtless in the hand of his father. Do you have children? Do you have grandchildren? Imagine being Yazan's parent, empty of despair, watching the candle of his life drop while powerless to help. Yazan Abu Fil, 2-year-old. Mr. President, this is the reality. This is the grim reality that the Israeli authorities want to conceal. This is why international journalists are banned from Gaza. This is why Palestinian journalists are deliberately targeted and assassinated. 245 of them have lost their lives. Late August, the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, deliberately killed 6 journalists. They carried nothing but the word, but the image, and they raised nothing but their voices. The word, this very Security Council did nothing after this crime. And so, the Israeli occupying power repeated the same pattern. This Monday, the day before yesterday, at Nasser Hospital, 5 more journalists were killed, were assassinated. Among them was Maryam Abu Daqqa, a young, a beautiful mother. She was 33 years. Her armor was her press vest. Her weapon, a camera. A few days before, she wrote on X a letter to her 13-year-old. His name is Ghaid. In this letter, she left words that carry more weight than any official statement. And I quote, "Right, you are the heart and soul of your mother. When I die, I want you to pray for me, not to cry for me. I want you never to forget me. I did everything to keep you happy and safe. And when you grow, when you marry, and when you have a daughter, name her Maryam after me. Mr. President, will this council persist as a theater of lamentation, endlessly echoing speeches, while Gaza burns for lack of actions? This council must act as a matter of duty, a moral duty, a legal duty, must act to impose a ceasefire and protect and save innocent lives, must act to ensure unhindered humanitarian access at scale, must act to feed the starving and break famine. To fail is to be complicit. To delay is to accept shame. Yes, shame. To stop a genocide is not an option. It is an obligation. I thank you.
Mr. President, members of the Security Council, ambassadors, estoy hoy aquí.
I am here today, before you, not just to raise my voice, but also for those who are not able to be here today, those who have still been kept hostage, or those who were brutally assassinated. My name is Ilana. I was born in Mexico into a Jewish family, profoundly connected to Israel. My home was always full of traditions and customs linked to Israel. One of my memories of childhood is to understand the work undertaken by many international organizations such as the UN and UNICEF. When I was in school, we always proudly promoted the values that I had learned from the institutions. However, I'm now here, and I'm wondering, where were these organizations when I needed them most?
I made Aliyah to Israel by myself. That decision was driven from my need to feel safe. Safe in a country which is free of danger from delinquents and cartels. A country where I can feel connected to my people, its culture, and have a future. Leaving everything behind wasn't easy, but I knew I was on the right path. Near us, a kibbutz near the border with Gaza, I built a home with my partner, Matan Sangauker. Our life was simple, ordinary, full of plans. I own a bakery, and later I was a manager of a greenhouse. Until October 7, shattered everything. At 6:30 in the morning, my life changed forever. That morning, Matan and I were sleeping at home, surrounded by everything we love. Within minutes, terror was upon us. We wake up to sirens, like every time before. Without imagining that this time, it was not just sirens. It was an attack by armed, funded, and violent terrorists who enter our home with intention to destroy everything dear to us. At first, we heard gunshots and shout in Arabic, and immediately realized that hell was before us. We look ourselves in the same room, Matan holding the door with all his might. Wael tried to calm our dog Nuni and keep him quiet, but we already know. They were going house to house in our kibbutz, near us, looking to kill, kidnap, and rape. It was our turn. They broke into my house, shooting in everything direction and breaking everything, until Matan could no longer hold the door of the safe room. At that moment, we jumped out the window in an attempt to escape death. In that moment, I lost contact with Matan. I hid behind a cabinet on the back porch of my neighbors Gadi and Judith's house. Gadi Haggai and Judith Weinstein Haggai, like so many others in Iros, were murdered on October 7, and their bodies were taken into Gaza. Slowly, I hear the sound of dry lives breaking and the shout of terrorists approaching. And then they grabbed me by my hair, hit me on the stomach, causing me lose my breath. They dragged me across the floor, lift me, and throw me against the wall. They put me guns at me, tried to fill me with my phone. I raised my hands, told them I was Mexican, begging them not to hurt me, not to rape me, not to shoot me, just let me go. The only thing I could think was why my family have to see me end my life like this. The terrorists beat me, humiliate me, touched me all over, threw me on the motorcycle, and took me to Gaza. I saw Iros, the place where we built our life, turned to ash. On the way to Gaza, when they start to touch me and sexual abuse me, I passed out physically and mentally. I couldn't hold it anymore. I guess my body prefers to shut down. They keep beat me because for them I was a prize. I wake up in a storm rain house, lying half naked on rocks, surrounded by Hamas terrorists. I had to beg not to be raped. I'm telling them I was on my period. At first, they didn't understand if I was on my period or I was pregnant, but nevertheless, that made them leave me alone. They threw me a hijab, a dress, at me, and ordered me to get dressed. I didn't know exactly what had been done to my body in those last minutes when I was in condition. But my soul already knew nothing will be ever the same. I was suffering for a fractured jaw, a broken pelvis, ear damage for explosion, and a burn leg. One of the first day, many people came to see me, to play main games. One of them fixated on me. He told me I will never leave, that I was beautiful, that we were going to marry and have children. Even if there is a deal, I will not be released. He handed me with his gun, told me to play with it, and stole all my jewelry. The next day, around noon, they brought me another hostage from near us. That gave me strength. I realized I wasn't alone. We looked out for each other. After a week, our wars told us that the IDF is going to attack the house, so we need to move to a different place. I found myself walking through the Gaza streets, holding the terrorist's hand as if I were his wife. When we arrived at the other apartment, all of the neighbors came out to see the new prize. They knew exactly who we are. We stayed there for only one day and moved again. This time, they took us to a dirty house full with cockroaches. We slept on the floor with a thin mattress that wasn't a really mattress. We spent over 14 days there with barely any food, almost no water, constant psychological terror, no basic human or humanitarian needs, such as medicine, showers, hygienic products. In 55 days in captivity, I lost 12 kilograms, which is around 24 pounds. They did not give me any medicines. No doctor came to see me, even though I told them that I was suffering from colitis and anemia. The terrorists dedicate everything. Where we call talk, where we call go to the bathroom, when we call get up, they wake up us in the middle of the night for cruel interrogations. From the moment I was captured, the wars were with me all the time. They did not wear Hamas uniforms. They dressed like civilians. They told me that one of them is a math teacher, and the other one is a lawyer. For 50 days, they made me sure I could not escape. They told us all the time that we would be hostage for 5 or even 10 years. When it was time to eat, they took a lot of food to their room that they have meat, rice, and vegetables. At the same time, they left us with our meal, which contained sometimes as little as 10 chickpeas or a piece of dry flat bread, which wasn't always well cooked. About 4 days before my release, someone knocked on the door. We wake up terrified, thinking we weren't going to be included in the deal. But they came to tell us we were going home. They changed our clothes, moved us, and prepared us to leave. But it was a lie. They transferred me to a hospital. Now I know it was the Nasser hospital. They look us through the back entrance and walk us past all the civilians. In the hospital, there was an area which was closed off and used only by Hamas, with an armored ward. They look us in a room where we meet the third hostage. The next morning, around 10 a.m., they told us again that we are going home. They moved us on another room and made me undress to check I have no surveillance device on me. Later, they briefed us, checked us, gave us supplies, and told us to get into a car waiting outside. But instead of taking us to freedom, they take us to a tunnel. There we see more hostages, some of whom were my friends from my kibbutz near us. I saw Eitan Oren and David Cunho there, who still remain in Hasson Hamas. It was only then, in the tunnels, after more than 50 days, that I found out that my boyfriend Matan was also a hostage, just a short distance away, but I couldn't reach him. I begged to the terrorists to let me see him. They said later, I made me two different things, such as clean the kitchen to make me think that after that they will let me see him. Later never came and did not get to see Matan. The next day, they told me I was leaving. I refused. I wanted to see Matan. I knew that if I would leave, my soul will remain there in Gaza. But they didn't let me stay. So I left with a hole in my heart. I promised my friend I will do everything in my power to bring them home. And now I'm keeping that promise. People see my face and think I'm free. But freedom is not a switch you can turn on and off. Trauma doesn't vanish once you are released. Now, with every siren, every rocket for Iran, Yemen, or Gaza, I'm throwing back into the held. The difference, I have a safe room. Matan doesn't. He is still in Gaza. You hear about what Hamas has done on October 7. Women were raped, abused, and humiliated, and the world chose silence. Why is our pain treated as less? Why our histories questioned, denied, erased? I am here not just for myself, but for every woman and man who didn't make it home, for every voice which was ignored, for the 50 hostages still in Gaza, for their families. I'm calling on human rights groups and everyone who claims to care, stand with us, speak up, demand the truth, because silence is betrayal. Matan, stay strong. Don't lose hope. Your mom, sister, our dog Nuni, and I are all waiting for you. También estoy aquí.
I am also here. I am also here today as a Mexican woman, because that's where I was born, where the cartels kill and torture people. They call them as they are. Terrorists, criminals, delinquents. The world doesn't hesitate to condemn them. So that's why I wonder why Hamas, who burn children alive, rape women, and mutilate bodies, kidnap children and adults, why are they not condemned in the same way? Why is Hamas considered differently? Why is it not considered the terrorist group that it is? Why are Jewish victims questioned, and why are our accounts questioned when others are immediately believed? This is a double standard, and it's hypocritical. It's not just hypocrisy, it's betrayal.
Of the Council, do not turn away. Do not look for excuses. Do not allow political divisions to silence the voices of victims. Use your influence, your power, your responsibility to demand the unconditional release of every hostage. No tomorrow, not in some distant future, but now. We need to make a deal. People in Israel want this war to end. Bring them home. Bring Matan home. Bring all of them home. Only then I will be able to begin to heal. Only then can the hostages' families begin to heal. Only then we will begin to believe again in the values that the Council was created to uphold. Mr. President, Excellence, I was released after 55 days, but my soul remains in captivity with Matan and all the hostages. Until they return, no one of us truly free. Thank you so much.
I now give the floor to the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine.
Mr. President, thank you very much for convening this meeting, and our thanks to all the briefers for their presentations and testimonies to the Council. Before I deliver the rest of my statement, I just want to share with you that maybe thousands of Palestinian children are with us in this room. I see them. I feel them. They are angels. They're coming to you and listening to all of you. And I'm grateful to almost all of you who said so many good things, and you demanded immediate ceasefire. So those angels who do not know hatred, they are extending their hands to you. We want peace. We want ceasefire. We want food. We want medicine. We want to stop this war permanently. We want to live in peace with all the children in the region. We don't want the pain that we endure to be endured by anyone else. And I add that those who think that they have a monopoly of pain, they are not really genuine about not feeling the pain of others, because we feel their pain, we understand it because we live it every moment. And let me also add, we are very grateful for the courageous principled position of the United Nations, of the Secretary General, of Mr. Lazzarini of UNRWA, of Mr. Fletcher from OCHA, and the three distinguished humanitarian officers, whether from the United Nations or from Save the Children. If all those peoples and the ICJ and the ICC and so many other reports are not convincing very small number of people of truly the facts on the ground, and they still believe that there is a huge coalition against Israel, then why don't you, the Security Council, again I call, go to Gaza, meet with everyone, investigate the situation, know what is really happening to the Palestinian people, to the children, to the mothers, to the elderly, those who are starving, those who cannot have a hospital to attend to their wounds. Why don't you go there and investigate that situation? And take with you hundreds of journalists to report if all of the reports of the UN is biased, and if the reports of the IPC is not accurate. Go and investigate. Take journalists. Take journalists from Washington, from New York, from Los Angeles, from Chicago, from Israel itself, from everyone. Let them go and investigate instead of killing journalists. If the truth is what we're seeking, aren't these the methods of finding the truth? And go to Tel Aviv. Meet with the families of all the hostages and the tens of thousands who are screaming with them, saying, stop the war now so that the hostages to be released. All the hostages that were released including this lady with us, Ms. Gritsky, was released because of a ceasefire. Ceasefire save lives, release hostages. Continuation of the war takes lives and kill our children and women and many others, including Israelis. So if all these things are fabricated and cannot be trusted, go and investigate so that we can have an agreement over to suffocate the Palestinian people, to fragment the Palestinian state, to thwart our self-determination and independence, to destroy the two-state solution. Everywhere the same plan, the same objective, even if the means differ. Get rid of the Palestinian people to seize Palestinian land. Destruction, death, displacement, and endless torment of the indigenous people of this land. But Israel does not want peace. Thank you, Mr. President.
Agradezco.
I thank the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine for this statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Ilana. Your courage honors us all. On October 7th, Hamas stripped you from your home in Kibbutz Nir Oz with your partner Matan Sangauker. You survived 55 days in unimaginable conditions. You are free, but Matan is not. He has been in captivity for almost 700 days. No freedom, no light, no dignity. You were born in Mexico. You came to Israel more than 15 years ago to build your life as a proud Jew. We know your heart is still with Matan and the others. Your testimony is the voice of those who cannot speak. It is a living reminder of the unbearable suffering that the hostages are still enduring. Their freedom cannot wait. The report on sexual violence in armed conflict confirms what we have always known and what Ilana bravely shared. Hamas used sexual violence as a weapon of war. Survivors deserve action, no doubt. Blacklist Hamas now. The Security Council must finally designate them as the terrorist organization they are. So despite all the lies in this room, we will not lose sight of our goal, to bring Matan home, to bring them all home. Council members, some of you have forgotten about Matan. You have forgotten how this all began and the truth above why it continues. We will not leave them behind. Their freedom cannot wait. That is why the war continues. To free our people and end Hamas's reign of terror. But instead of focusing your attention on the hostages or on the crimes of the Hamas terror organization, a campaign of diversion from these issues continues. An echo chamber that swaps facts for slogans. Look no further for evidence than the IPC report. Maybe we should call it the fabricated report. The IPC lowered its own thresholds to manufacture a so-called famine. It cut the global standard from 30% to 15% for the report only, for this report only, and ignored its second criteria altogether, and I will get to that later. It refused to count most of the aid that did not pass through the UN. It used flawed methods while ignoring the wider data available because it didn't serve its narrative. By design, it misrepresents the true data. Across its many pages, and I'm sure you read some of the report, more than 50 pages. Across its many pages, Hamas is not mentioned even once. The terrorist organization that began this war and steals the aid for its own use is not even mentioned. One of the report's co-authors is Mr. Andrew Seal. Mr. Seal is a radical anarchist who publicly accused Israel of genocide already in October 2023, just days after the massacre of our people. And now, officially, he celebrates the Houthi terrorists as upholders of international law. And he is the one of the co-signer of the report. How could any of you claim this is a legitimate report? If it were any other nation, in any other context, the IPC would publicly apologize for its failures and retract this fabricated report. But because the report demonizes Israel, any claim is taken as fact. And I've listened to you all. Well, how about we examine the actual facts and only then cast judgment? Preliminary analysis by both official Israeli bodies and independent experts indicate that this so-called report includes IPC invented data that did not exist. They invented 182 virtual deaths to reach the threshold of 188, supposedly for famine. So the number didn't work for them. There was only 6. So they added 182. So now they can come with this report. Second fact, the IPC cherry-picked data from a survey of 15,749 children. They took data from only 7,519 children, which leads to the desired political result of the report's authors. Third, IPC hid data that contradicts the agenda. The IPC conducted 2 surveys in Gaza and hid one of the surveys in the appendix that shows there is no famine in Gaza. Following these gross forgeries, we are demanding the IPC for the immediate removal of the forged report. Let's continue to examine the facts. Let's speak about the aid. The UN's own records show more than 500 trucks carrying over 46,000 tons of aid have entered Gaza. That's since May 19, 94% of which was food. Yet, according to the UN agenda, if you read carefully, only about 1 in 9 or 8 trucks actually reached their destinations. 1 out of 9. Why? Because armed groups and Hamas terrorists intercepted the rest of the trucks inside Gaza. Not in Israel, not at the gates, not at the checkpoints, inside Gaza. In the same period, more than 7,400 trucks with over 139,000 tons of food and over 2,000 tons of medical supplies entered. But the IPC refused to count them. On the ground, the picture is clear. The crossings are open, despite the daily lies about crossing closures from the mouth of Mr. Tom Fletcher. On a typical recent day, 300 to 400 truckloads are collected inside Gaza, while hundreds more sit waiting on the Gaza side for the UN to distribute it. When partners actually collect and distribute, prices fall. And it's not me saying it or him saying it. You can look at the market price. We have seen the prices of goods fall dramatically, but this fact is also ignored. Prices are the most accurate measurement of shortages. For example, a kilogram of flour has recently fallen by 80% in the markets of Gaza. Non-UN channels are helping to fill the gaps. 90+ community kitchens are serving 600,000 meals a day. 18 hospitals and 12 field hospitals are operating with tens of thousands of tons of medical supplies delivered. Thousands of patients have been evacuated for treatment. We are powering water lines and a desalination plant so hundreds of thousands could easily access drinking water. We continue to work with organizations committed to humanitarian work, not political incitement. Yesterday, World Food Programme Executive Director Cindy McCain entered Gaza and visited both Deir el-Balach and the Gazan side of the Kerem Shalom crossing to see these efforts herself. But the IPC report hides this reality behind intentionally flawed methods. They lower the bar, exclude the aid they dislike, and publish the worst case possible. That is not humanitarian work. That is diversion. This same diversion feeds the next one, statements that reward terror. Colleagues, we all know that not too long ago, there was progress toward a hostage agreement. Mediators were working. There was hope. Then France and the UK made their announcements about their recognition intentions. Many others followed suit. They gave Hamas an out. They told Hamas that if they agree to a ceasefire and release the hostages, they will get nothing from the international community. They encouraged Hamas to disengage and walk away from the negotiations. To those countries, look at your actions and at Hamas's response to them. When France made its announcement, Hamas called it, and I quote, positive step in the right direction, and urged all states to, and I quote, follow France, and hailed it as the fruits of October 7. That's how Hamas called your statement, the fruits of October 7. When the Dutch foreign minister resigned a few days ago, Hamas praised this resignation and called it a moral and courageous stance. When Australia changed its policy, a Hamas official thanked the Australian Prime Minister for his, quote, political courage. These are the people cheering you on: rapists, murderers, kidnappers. You are supposed to stand for Western values, peace, justice, and human rights, but your policy is applauded by terrorist monsters who continue to hold innocent people hostage. I hope that fact might cause these nations to reflect. So I hope the virtue signaling was worth it, worth the pain of the hostages, worth the pain of their families, worth the pain of the civilians in Gaza whom Hamas uses as human shields and political tools. You have set a precedent. Murder civilians and you will be heard. Take hostages and you will be rewarded. Every terrorist group is watching. The lesson is simple: violence works. Now we look to September, where there may be more statements similar to the New York Declaration, which naively states, and I quote, Hamas must end its rule in Gaza and hand over its weapons to the Palestinian Authority. So I'm asking you, and I will ask the leaders that will come here in September, how do you plan on accomplishing this? How exactly do you plan on removing Hamas from the equation? How do you think it will go? You will ask them to disarm? You will ask them to leave Gaza and bring the PA officials? The last time they had any relationship with the PA officials, and Mr. Mansour can agree to that because I don't know if he was there, they threw them from the rooftops in Gaza. They tortured them, the PA officials. That was the last time any PA official was in Gaza. So when you make a statement, how it will work? We know it will not happen from empty UN statements or meaningless summits. We know you leave the real work to us. You may not say it, but you know it too. At least be honest about what your statements really mean. Empowering Hamas and allowing them to continue to exploit the people of Gaza and threaten the people of Israel? That's what it means if they will stay there. And I tell you today, we will never allow that to happen. Mr. President, this Council can keep chasing distractions or return to core principles. The hostages, say their names, demand proof of life, demand they receive aid, medical care, and visits from the Red Cross. Use real pressure on those who hold leverage over Hamas. Make them return the first sentence of every statement in this chamber until they are home. Hamas's rule must end. Any meaningful future for Palestinians and Israelis require it. You cannot build accountable institutions around murderous terrorists. Israel will keep doing the hard work. We will bring our people home. We will dismantle Hamas's war machine. Ilana, to you, to Matan's family, and to all the families, we will not be diverted. We will not be deterred. We will bring them all back home. Thank you, Mr. President.
Agradezco.
I thank the representative of Israel for the statement. Delegation of France has asked for the floor to make an additional statement. You have the floor.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I apologise for extending this session by a little bit, but these are very serious and weighty topics, the issue of hostages, and I'm not going to repeat what I already said. We stand in solidarity on the matter, and we believe in the need to release the hostages just as soon as possible. I would like to just respond to two points, at least 2 points that have been mentioned but that affect my country, France. The first point is this assertion according to which the policy that we're pursuing, the two-state solution, the initiative that we are engaging in with Saudi Arabia can in any way be instrumentalized by Hamas. We are aware that Hamas has its own means of communicating. We are in no way whatsoever responsible for the way that this is instrumentalized by Hamas. And I would like to quote a part of the letter by the French president to the Israeli prime minister, if necessary, to clarify, as if it was necessary to clarify once again, that the New York Declaration, this is my second point, is in no way whatsoever something that concerns the issue of Hamas. We haven't taken it from that standpoint. We are addressing it to states. Hamas has no role in a Palestinian state. So I'd like to quote what the French president said in his letter. Our determination to ensure that the Palestinian people have a state is rooted in our belief that a lasting peace is crucial for the solution and its full integration into a region, a logic of normalization that we support that needs to be implemented as soon as possible. The interpreter is paraphrasing. This lasting peace involves the establishment of a sovereign Palestinian state, recognizing Israel's right to security, demilitarized living in peace. In no case does this double belief enable any complicity with Hamas or any other terrorist group to threaten Israel. The Palestinian state must be the end of Hamas. I will stop there. Of course, you can read other parts of that letter, but I think it's sufficiently clear. And in the New York Declaration, and I'd like to reiterate this declaration very clearly, not naively, talks about the end of Hamas and its disarmament. Thank you very much.
Agradezco a Francia.
I thank France for the statement. I would just like to express my sincere thanks to the interpreters who have enabled us to continue without interruption of this session, and whose work is excellent. And I now see that the delegation of Algeria is asking for the floor. Algeria has asked for the floor. You have the floor.
Président, je voudrais...
Thank you, President. I don't wish to extend this meeting too much longer. And I did hesitate a great deal before asking to speak again. I hesitated because I can feel the anxiety, the revulsion from Miss Grevitsky. I listened to her. I listened very carefully to what she said. And I listened very respectfully to what she said. But the suffering that she is enduring does not allow her within this council to do what she did. That is to say, to upset the members of this council, in spite of what she has been through, in spite of all of her suffering, in spite of everything. That does not allow her or authorize her to upset the members of the council, to cause discomfort among members of this council when a member of this council is giving a statement. I don't wish to respond directly to what was said by the representative of Israel. Simply, I just wanted to say that I regret that 2 days ago there were 20 people killed. When there was a bombing that was authorized by the Israeli army, including 5 journalists who died. And this includes poor Miriam. There were also humanitarian workers. There were ambulance workers. Not one word was uttered for those 20 victims, 20 human lives. Human lives that were cut short. They had families, they had children. Not one word of regret was uttered, at least before this council. I don't wish to extend the meeting any further. This meeting has been painful for us all. because we all felt, beyond our country's positions, we all felt a deep feeling of inability to act, a feeling of helplessness, unable to fulfill our mandate. And that is a matter of disgust to us all, and it saddens us all. Thank you. The President, I thank the representative of Guyana for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Deputy Special Coordinator Alakbarov, Deputy Emergency Relief Coordinator Masuya, and Ms. Ashing for your briefings. And thank you, Ilana Grudzuski, for your testimony today and your courage. It reminds us how this war began and why it persists. It is also a reminder that this Council and the United Nations as a whole have failed in their mission. They would do well to listen to voices like yours and learn from what you have been going through. Colleagues, the path to a better future in the Middle East is clear. It starts with freeing Matan and all 50 hostages who remain in captivity nearly 2 years after October 7th, 2023. It means ensuring that Hamas, a barbaric terrorist organization, never controls Gaza again, nor poses a security threat to Israel. The United States continues to work tirelessly to accomplish all those objectives while supporting humanitarian assistance to innocent people in need. We cannot expect peace as long as Hamas is a ruling force in Gaza that is threatening or attacking Israel. It is no coincidence that talks with Hamas fell apart after several countries, including members of this Council, announced their intention to effectively reward Hamas for the massacre by recognizing a Palestinian state, all while hostages are still being held in subhuman conditions. Hamas officials have even said that unilateral recognition is one of the fruits of October 7th. The United States continues to focus on the real and important tasks at hand, not conferences, but serious diplomatic efforts and providing humanitarian assistance in a war zone where a terrorist organization uses aid as the basis for its terrorist machine. Mr. President, we all recognize that hunger is a real issue in Gaza and that there are significant humanitarian needs which must be met. Addressing those needs is a priority for the United States. However, we can only solve problems with credibility and integrity. Unfortunately, the recent report from the IPC doesn't pass the test on either. One of the report's key authors has a lengthy record of bias against Israel, including openly justifying the Houthis' terrorist attacks on Israeli civilian targets. By his own measure, he ought to have recused himself. This helps explain why the normal standards were changed for this declaration, raising significant questions. We can spend no shortage of time pontificating and lecturing, but we are here to solve real problems affecting real people, and the only way to do that is with credibility and integrity. Colleagues, President Trump wants to alleviate the suffering the people in Gaza are experiencing at the hands of Hamas and has prioritized getting aid to people in need while implementing safeguards to prevent Hamas from looting. As of August 26th, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has delivered more than 140 million meals directly to civilians in Gaza, 1.5 million meals just today. UN data on the UN's own deliveries tells a different story. Between May 19th and August 25th of this year, over 85% of trucks and 62,000 pallets of aid were intercepted in transit in Gaza. the hard truth is that the international community has poured hundreds of billions of dollars into Gaza over the years, while turning a blind eye to the fact that it was subsidizing and facilitating Hamas's creation of a terrorist stronghold. Colleagues, we will also take this occasion to reject the falsehood that there is a policy of starvation in Gaza. Since the beginning of the war in Gaza, Israel has enabled an unprecedented amount of more than 2 million tons of aid to flow into the Gaza Strip. We are working closely with the government of Israel to increase the flow of aid without benefiting Hamas and are seeing tangible results. Instead of echoing false narratives which only embolden Hamas, prolong the war, and hurt civilians in Gaza, we urge the UN and the rest of this Council to join us in working constructively to deliver aid to civilians that doesn't benefit Hamas. Rather than accept mass diversion of aid as a fait accompli, the United Nations, Council members, and IPC partners should support other mechanisms, including the GHF. We have also seen the Jordan corridor and the facilitation of commercial deliveries of food and other supplies into Gaza, and airdrops by Jordan, the UAE, and other international partners. The United States stands prepared to contribute toward real efforts that will supply life-saving aid to people on the ground in Gaza. Mr. President, we share the same dedication to the hostages underground, starved in tunnels, suffering through Hamas's captivity. Hamas must immediately free all remaining 50 hostages, living and deceased. The reality is that this war could end today if Hamas freed all the hostages and surrendered. We urge the UN Security Council and all members to play a constructive role, call for the immediate release of remaining hostages, hold Hamas to account, and demand it disarm and leave Gaza. Mr. President, we understand that Israel has expressed deep regret for harm to civilians and has already released findings from its investigation into the strikes on Nasser Hospital. The IDF concluded 6 Hamas members, one of whom had participated in the October 7th attacks, were killed when the IDF struck the site Hamas was using to monitor troops at the hospital. We note the prompt nature of this investigation and response and call on this Council to condemn the continued use of civilian infrastructure by Hamas. We also acknowledge a stable West Bank keeps Israel secure and is in line with this administration's goal to achieve peace in the region. Finally, Mr. President, the United States welcomes the government of Lebanon's decision to task the Lebanese armed forces with a plan to bring all weapons under state control by the end of the year. This historic step shows the Trump administration continues to work toward peace and stability with our partners in the region. The Lebanese armed forces now must act to fully implement the government's decision. The United States will do its part to help forge a new reality in the Middle East alongside Israel and our partners. The Middle East can still be a region of opportunity, innovation, prosperity, and peace. We cannot miss this historic opportunity. Thank you.
I thank the briefers for their briefings. The Gaza conflict has persisted for nearly 700 days. Gaza has long become a living hell, with the 2 million Gazan people deeply trapped in a massive man-made catastrophe and over 1 million facing a food security emergency. The international community needs to exhaust every effort possible to prevent further deteriorations. China reiterates that violence cannot bring security, neither can force win peace. Israel's continued escalated military offensives have resulted in the loss of numerous innocent lives daily. Israel's strike on the Al-Nasser hospital on 25th of August killed over 20 civilians, journalists, and medical workers, creating yet another horrendous tragedy. Israel is still moving forward with its military plan to take over Gaza. The plan, once implemented, will inevitably lead to more bloodshed and displacement, adding to the danger and insecurity both Gazans and detained hostages are facing. China objects to and condemns all actions that harm civilians, damage infrastructure, and violate international law. We urge Israel to heed the strong calls from the international community, immediately cease its military operations in Gaza, and immediately halt any dangerous moves that escalate tensions. China further reiterates that violations of international humanitarian law are unacceptable, the weaponization of humanitarian supplies is unacceptable, and the militarization of an aid distribution mechanism is equally unacceptable. All along, the biggest challenge for scaling up humanitarian assistance in Gaza has not been the shortage of supplies or the inadequacies of the UN and other humanitarian agencies. Rather, it has always been the occupying power, Israel's lack of political will, and its deliberately created obstacles. We call on Israel to fulfill its obligations as an occupying power under the international humanitarian law by opening all border crossings, fully restoring humanitarian access, and supporting the UN's delivery of aid consistent with humanitarian principles to truly alleviate the humanitarian disaster on the ground. China reaffirms that the long unfulfilled aspiration for an independent Palestinian state is a fundamental reason preventing the solution to the Palestinian question and the root cause of the recurrent volatility of the Palestinian-Israeli situation. The Palestinian people's right to statehood, right to survival, and right to return must no longer be ignored. Israel's recent approval of a settlement expansion plan in the E1 area of the West Bank will severely undermine the contiguity of the Palestinian territory to the detriment of the foundation of a Palestinian statehood. The international community must build on the positive momentum of the two-state solution, reinvigorate the political prospect of the two-state solution with the utmost urgency, firmly reject any forced displacement of the Palestinian people, and oppose any dangerous attempts to annex the West Bank and Gaza. President, when peace is absent in the Middle East, peace is elusive for the world. At present, the Middle East situation is complex and fragile, with multiple intertwined hotspot issues. Amidst all this, however, the question of Palestine remains central to the Middle East issue. China supports the Council in taking all necessary actions to achieve a ceasefire, ending the fighting in Gaza, and alleviate the humanitarian disaster. We call on all countries, particularly the country with significant influence over the parties concerned, to uphold a just and responsible position and play a constructive part. China will continue to work with the international community towards ending the war in Gaza, advancing the implementation of the two-state solution, and ultimately achieving a comprehensive, just, and lasting solution of the Palestinian question so that both the Palestinian and Israeli peoples can live in shared tranquility and happiness. I thank you, President.
Agradecemos a la
I thank the representative of China for the statement, and I give the floor to the Russian Federation.
Спасибо.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are grateful to today's briefers for their information about the situation in the Gaza Strip. Over the past few days, we, just like many of our colleagues, were stunned by the new data on the record scale of famine in Gaza. These signals and persistent calls to Israel to immediately stop the collective punishment of the Palestinians have been forthcoming from different global capitals, including Moscow, and also international headquarters structures, regional organizations, and representatives of our global organizations throughout the world. Furthermore, the world is calling on West Jerusalem to recognize that there is no alternative to a peaceful settlement to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which would pave the way for establishing genuine peace and security in the Middle East. This is the sole scenario that meets the interests both of the Israelis and all of their neighbors. Today, almost 2 years after the start of the bloody war in Gaza, indeed, it's difficult to find the right words to describe the scale of the destruction and human suffering in the Gaza Strip. The most succinct and at the same time terrifying recent depiction was by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who described the situation in Gaza with one word: hell. The UNRWA Commissioner General, Mr. Lazzarini, characterized the situation in the Strip as bordering on genocide, and the forced population displacement is akin to ethnic cleansing. Such statements in other cases in the assessment of the UN leadership is backed up by daily reports from Gaza about the deaths of dozens of civilians. Just the day before yesterday, indiscriminate strikes by Israel on Gaza killed 70 people. 2 days ago, live on air, as a result of the attacks on the Strip, the Nasser hospital was destroyed and more than 20 people were killed, including 5 journalists. Furthermore, judging by the images in the media, a cynical double-tap strike was used when rescue workers arrived. Even Benjamin Netanyahu already admitted that Israel's direct responsibility for what occurred, calling it a tragic mishap and promising to conduct an investigation. Mr. President, we'd like also to draw your attention to the actions of the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Since the foundation started its work in May this year, the situation has turned into a completely tragic and unacceptable one. According to various assessments, more than 1,800 Palestinians have died trying to get humanitarian assistance. Thousands of them were near the distribution points that were managed by this pseudo-humanitarian structure. According to reports, strikes on civilians are occurring not only regularly, but also precisely. People in their utter despair spend the night at distribution points and in response get bullets in them. This is no humanitarian mission. This is violence hidden behind good intentions. Under the guise of so-called humanitarian work, there is a policy of fear and intimidation against defenseless civilians. These methods are unacceptable. There's no doubt whatsoever that the work of the foundation in its current form is dangerous and is not in line with recognized humanitarian principles, and denying this is pointless. Mr. President, given this, we're seriously concerned about reports in the media that the UN Secretariat, allegedly ceding to pressure from Israel and the US, has committed to ratcheting down the rhetoric regarding the GHF. We would like to note that starting from August, whatever the situation in the humanitarian reports in the UN have de facto stopped mentioning the work of this structure. We believe that we hope that these assurances do not reflect reality. We are convinced that the UN Secretariat cannot and should not renounce its principles, namely that humanitarian assistance should not be turned into an instrument of blackmail. We trust that the Secretary General and the humanitarian wing of the UN will consistently and unambiguously advocate for humanitarian assistance to be provided in strict compliance with the norms of international humanitarian law and the principles of humanity, impartiality, neutrality, and independence. Mr. President, the horrific statistics of the number of victims caused by the Israeli military operation in Gaza, more than 63,000 Palestinians have died, is in no way stopping the Netanyahu government that has opted to cleanse the densely populated Gaza city and to take total control over the Gaza Strip. West Jerusalem is not sobered either by the opinion of the overwhelming majority of the international community. We'd like to remind you that on the 10th of August, during the emergency meeting of the Security Council, almost all delegations, including those from Arab and Muslim countries, condemned the new escalatory actions of Israel, underscoring the growing security risks not only to the inhabitants of Gaza, but also to the Israeli hostages held there. We are also surprised that the IDF operation to take Gaza City was started against a background of reports that Hamas had agreed to the proposal of the mediators to release some hostages and to a temporary ceasefire. We are closely following the diplomatic efforts of the mediators, inter alia the efforts of Washington. Quite frankly, we do see some discrepancies in the views on how the negotiations are going. American colleagues are always saying that Hamas is refusing to do a deal. The US delegation has been trying to convince the Security Council at least of this over the past few months. At the same time, there are signs that the movement is prepared to do a deal. and Israel is either rejecting the mediator's proposal or is simply expanding the hostilities on the ground and is not demonstrating real interest in reaching agreement. This was publicly announced yesterday in the Qatari media, which, along with the US and Egypt, is participating in the negotiations. We have heard, colleagues, about the American aggressive diplomacy on the ground for some months now, but once again, we regrettably are convinced that it is not giving encouraging results. We would urge our American colleagues to think not only about the interests of Israel that they have been banging on about with great zeal, but also the fate of Palestinian civilians whose lives and futures today, to a large extent, depend on the action or the inaction of this council. Sir, multilateral diplomacy alone, which we are strongly urging our US colleagues to engage in, can and should give a chance to revive the two-state formula. This principle, enshrined in the relevant resolutions of the Security Council and the General Assembly of the UN, today truly is under threat. The reason for this, and in the case of the man-made humanitarian disaster in Gaza that runs counter to international law, is Israel's policy to establish new facts on the ground. The most high-profile was the recent decision by the Higher Planning Committee to approve settlement construction in Area E1 in the West Bank to the east of Jerusalem. We all understand that the implementation of this large-scale expansionist project will breach the contiguity of the territorial integrity of a future Palestinian state, dividing up the West Bank into two isolated enclaves, separate from each other. What is frightening in this regard is not only the concept itself and the unambiguous utterances of Israeli officials. For example, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Smotrich, clearly stated that the plan would permanently bury the idea of a Palestinian state. That's the end of quote. But also that such provocative acts are enjoying support from some American senior diplomats. The US ambassador to Israel, Mr. Mike Huckabee, pointed out that the E1 area construction apparently did not violate international law. Such opinions directly run counter to the foundational document of Middle East settlement process and also the recent decisions of the Security Council, including Resolution 2334. Mr. President, in conclusion, we'd like to underscore our unwavering stance in favour of having diplomatic settlement alone to the Palestinian question based on the two-state, two-people solution to meet the legitimate concerns of Israel in the area of security and also the rightful expectations of the Palestinian people to their own state. The alternative to this is further isolation of Western Jerusalem and the international scene and the growth and the number of civilian in Gaza victims. Israel is thus not going to solve the problem of its own security, but it would just be simply pushing it off by fostering revenge and hatred among young Palestinians. This is extremely short-sighted and an irresponsible policy. Thank you very much.
Agradezco.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation.
Peace Process, Mr. Ramiz Al-Kabarov, and also the ASG for Humanitarian Affairs, Ms. Joyce Musuma, for their briefings. I would also like to thank Ms. Inga Ashing for the briefing on the very devastating consequences of the situation in Gaza. I would like to say that it's very important for the very moving testimony of Ms. Grzewski to be heard. She is extremely courageous, and we're pleased she was here in the Council. Sir, France reiterates that it stands firmly in solidarity with the families of all hostages who must be released immediately. France denounces the barbaric cruelty of the treatment and the way they are treated by Hamas and the ghastly stage images made by this terrorist movement. I would convey my heartfelt thoughts to the family of our compatriot Ohad Yalhoumi, assassinated in Gaza. We will continue to act unfailingly to ensure the return of all the hostages, and we will continue to rally against anti-Semitism and the barbaric acts that anti-Semitism engenders throughout the world. Sir, the humanitarian situation in Gaza is tragic. Famine is rife in the Gaza governorate, as has been confirmed by the UN on Friday last week. The use of famine as a weapon of war is likely to constitute a war crime. At the beginning of this week, harrowing images reached us of new Israeli strikes on the Khan Yunis hospital, which killed numerous civilians, including journalists. This is unacceptable. Civilians and journalists must be protected under all circumstances. France is concerned by the tragic situation for children, which is continuing to deteriorate. As we've heard from Ms. Inga Ashing's statement, Israel, in line with international law, is bound to ensure the protection of civilian populations and infrastructure and to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian assistance. Civilians, including journalists and humanitarian workers, must not be targeted, whatever their nationality. This Council must speak with one voice on this issue. France stands ready to support all Security Council initiatives along these lines. The approval by the Israeli government of the expansion of military operations in Gaza and the occupation plan of Gaza seems as if they're forging ahead regardless. These operations will in no way ensure Israel's security. France reiterates its opposition to all forced displacement of the people in Gaza that would constitute a new grave violation of international law. Mr. President, there is an alternative that France and the other signatory states of the New York Declaration proposed: an immediate and permanent ceasefire. That is the top priority. And France is grateful for the unfailing efforts of Qatar, Egypt, and the US to achieve this. Also, the release of all hostages, mass delivery of humanitarian assistance, and a lasting political solution, including the disarmament of Hamas and the deployment of a temporary international stabilization mission. This mission's aim would be to ensure the security of Israelis and Palestinians, to enable the return of the Palestinian Authority to Gaza, and to contribute to the implementation of the two-state solution. France will work along these lines with its partners. France, furthermore, calls upon the member states of the United Nations who have not yet done so to endorse the New York Declaration. The implementation of the two-state solution is threatened more and more each day. In the West Bank, the approval of the E1 settlement project by the Israeli authorities has an assumed aim of making the implementation of a Palestinian state impossible. France reiterates its condemnation of settlements and of all the tension and violence that this caused. France will remain mobilized alongside its European partners to bring an end to this, including through new sanctions against those individuals and entities responsible for settlement activity. Mr. President, we are at a crossroads today. Our mobilization must not flag. We need to draw on the success of the international conference that took place here in New York in July, and we need to keep going along the right tracks. The future of all inhabitants of Israel and Palestine depends on it today and tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. I'd like to start by thanking Deputy Special Coordinator Alek Barov, ASG Masuya, Ms. Ashing, and Ms. Gritsevsky for your sobering and powerful briefings today, which underline one single truth. It is time for this terrible conflict to end. I'll make 3 points, President. First, the IPC's confirmation of famine in Gaza City marks the first officially recorded famine in modern history in the Middle East. It is entirely man-made, and, as my Foreign Secretary has said, it is a moral outrage. Over 100 children in Gaza have died of malnutrition, while food is sitting at Gaza's borders. I have 2 clear messages for Israel. Immediately lift restrictions and allow food, medical supplies, and fuel to reach those in desperate need in line with international humanitarian law, and allow the UN and international NGOs to carry out their life-saving work without obstruction. It is also vital that international humanitarian law is upheld. Israel's attack on Nasser Hospital this weekend, killing civilians, health workers, and journalists, is appalling. We note the ongoing inquiry into this attack, and it is imperative that there are urgent and transparent investigations which hold those responsible to account in a meaningful way. Second, Ms. Gritsevsky provided a truly harrowing account today of the cruelty she experienced at the hands of Hamas terrorists. The United Kingdom unequivocally condemns conflict-related sexual violence wherever it occurs, and we continue to call for justice for survivors of these abhorrent crimes. Her briefing also reminded us of the agony of the hostages still held in Gaza, including her partner, Matan Zangawa. The United Kingdom has been clear that Hamas must immediately release all the hostages taken on the 7th of October and lay down their weapons. And I recall that the Security Council has called for the unconditional and immediate release of the hostages in all 4 of our resolutions since the 7th of October. But I reiterate again today that Hamas must be held accountable for their despicable actions and can have no future in the governance of Gaza. A ceasefire remains the best way to secure the release of all the remaining hostages. The Israeli government's plan to expand military operations in Gaza will only put them in further danger. We condemn this decision and urge Israel to change course. Third, Israel's decision to approve plans for settlement construction in the E1 area in the West Bank, if implemented, would be a flagrant breach of international law, and it will take us further away from peace. Israel must retract these plans. The two-state solution conference last month demonstrated the strength of support, the strength of international support for a brighter future for the region. The United Kingdom opposes any actions which undermine the viability of the two-state solution and the long-term goal of Israelis and Palestinians living side by side in peace and security. President, now is the moment for the parties to redouble their efforts to secure an immediate ceasefire. This is the path to end the suffering in Gaza, secure the release of the hostages, and deliver a framework for lasting peace in the region. I thank you.
Agradezco a la delegación.
I thank the representative of the UK for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, President.
And we'd like to reiterate our support for the efforts and work undertaken by the United Nations agencies within their limitations in an extremely complicated environment in Gaza. We would also like to welcome the delegations of Israel and the observer state of Palestine. Panama also wishes to express our gratitude to Ms. Inga Ashing, Executive Officer of Save the Children International, which helps and protects thousands of children in armed conflicts, including the humanitarian tragedy playing out in Gaza today. We would also like to express our respect and solidarity with Ilana Gritsevsky, survivor of the kidnapping in the midst of the atrocious violence that occurred on the 7th of October. Your experience, also characterized by the absence still of your partner Matan, who remains in Gaza only enshrines the sorrow of this moment, but also the possibility of hope and human dignity. And your account also reflects the tragedy of two peoples who have been trapped in a cycle of increasingly cruel violence for too long. Your Excellencies, for 22 months we have borne witness to a war that continues to claim a human cost that rends the world's moral conscience and demands immediate action from this Council, which cannot continue to stand idly by. From that fateful day, the 7th of October, when 1,200 people were brutally assassinated and 250 people were taken as hostages by Hamas, acts that Panama unequivocally condemns, once again, the violence has not ceased. The suffering of so many innocent people reminds us that a future of peace and dignity for Gaza will only be possible without the terror of Hamas, whose ideology has no place in the life of two peoples who deserve to coexist in peace and security. However, nor can we ignore that the military response that was unleashed after these cruel attacks has only multiplied the suffering and devastation. It has plunged the Gaza Strip into an unprecedented humanitarian disaster, and the entire world into a moral dilemma. More than 62,000 Palestinians, including 18,000 children, have died. Tens of thousands have been injured. Millions have been displaced, and entire communities have been reduced to rubble. The humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, which has been irrefutably, visually and technically borne out by the report from the 22nd of August by the Integrated Food Security Classification, the IPC Famine Review Committee, which concluded that Gaza is already in Phase 5, which means a famine humanitarian catastrophe. According to this report, almost 500,000 people, that is to say 22% of the population, are living in conditions of famine, while in Deir al-Balah and Khan Yunis, the population are facing Phase 4, and in the north, the conditions are similar or even worse. It has been tragically shown that children are dying of hunger in the arms of their mothers, and entire families are surviving without water, without medicine, without shelter. This is not a natural disaster. It is not an inevitability. It is the direct result of human actions and human decisions using famine as a means of applying pressure and oppression. And these decisions do not bring the conflict any closer to an end. On the contrary, they only lead to more violence, more resentment, and more suffering. The attack on a hospital, the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis, which is not the first attack on a health facility in this war, and which killed more than 20 people, including doctors and 5 journalists, symbolizes how this war has gone beyond all human limits. Deliberately bombing a hospital to silence those who are telling the truth about what is happening on the ground, and then going back to attack the same site to kill journalists and those who had gone to the initial site to try to provide aid and medical assistance, and thus to try to save lives. This is a dual direct affront on human dignity and international law. That is why there must be a serious objective investigation in order to credibly shed light on responsibilities for this tragic incident, and thus to avoid impunity. Faithful to its history and its principles, Panama reaffirms its respect and commitment to international law, including international humanitarian law. Panama always promotes dialogue as a way to achieve political understanding and sustainable solutions. The disastrous situation in Gaza cannot, nor must it, lead to complicit silence in the face of actions that run roughshod over international law and run counter to the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. All members of this organization, we have the duty to act always guided by the defense of peace, security, and human dignity, without any exceptions. Palestinian civilians, the hostages, the humanitarian workers, journalists, the disappeared, and all of those who, simply because they are in Gaza, must be protected. They are and will continue to be those who pay the price of decisions taken by political leaders who seem to ignore the voices of the world, demanding for an end to the bloodshed. For the hostages, those who have disappeared and their families, we call for a ceasefire immediately in order to lead to the immediate, dignified, unconditional release of all hostages, to give their families hope once again. For the Palestinian families, we call for a ceasefire to end the killing and to allow parents to feed their children, to find and bury their loved ones with dignity, and to live without fear of not seeing tomorrow. For the humanitarian agencies and organizations and their workers, we call for a ceasefire to allow full, safe, and unhindered access to save lives without giving their own. For the journalists, we call for a ceasefire to ensure the right to report the truth without paying for that with their lives, to allow them to fulfill their professional and moral responsibility to provide information. For all of those, Your Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, Panama is calling loud and clear for a ceasefire, for human dignity and life. These factors must always be at the heart of all decisions taken. Your Excellencies, victory is not possible if it is built on the corpses of civilians, whose human dignity has been buried under the rubble of destroyed cities. The only viable, legitimate plan to achieve peace in the Middle East must involve two peoples, Israel and Palestine, who deserve it, living in security and dignity within internationally recognized borders and with guaranteed rights, free from fear and violence which encompasses them today. Delegation of France has asked for the floor to make an additional statement. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I apologise for extending this session by a little bit, but these are very serious and weighty topics, the issue of hostages, and I'm not going to repeat what I already said. We stand in solidarity on the matter, and we believe in the need to release the hostages just as soon as possible. I would like to just respond to 2 points, at least 2 points that have been mentioned but that affect my country, France. The first point is this assertion according to which the policy that we're pursuing, the two-state solution, the initiative that we are engaging in with Saudi Arabia can in any way be instrumentalized by Hamas. We are aware that Hamas has its own means of communicating. We are in no way whatsoever responsible for the way that this is instrumentalized by Hamas. And I would like to quote a part of the letter by the French president to the Israeli prime minister, if necessary, to clarify, as if it was necessary to clarify once again, that the New York Declaration, this is my second point, is in no way whatsoever something that concerns the issue of Hamas. We haven't taken it from that standpoint. We are addressing it to states. Hamas has no role in a Palestinian state. So I'd like to quote what the French president said in his letter. Our determination to ensure that the Palestinian people have a state is rooted in our belief that a lasting peace is crucial for the solution and its full integration into a region, a logic of normalization that we support that needs to be implemented as soon as possible. The interpreter is paraphrasing. This lasting peace involves the establishment of a sovereign Palestinian state, recognizing Israel's right to security, demilitarized living in peace. In no case does this double belief enable any complicity with Hamas or any other terrorist group to threaten Israel. The Palestinian state must be the end of Hamas. I will stop there. Of course, you can read other parts of that letter, but I think it's sufficiently clear. And in the New York Declaration, and I'd like to reiterate this declaration very clearly, not naively, talks about the end of Hamas and its disarmament. Thank you very much.
Agradezco a Francia.
I thank France for the statement. I would just like to express my sincere thanks to the interpreters who have enabled us to continue without interruption of this session, and whose work is excellent. And I now see that the delegation of Algeria is asking for the floor. Algeria has asked for the floor. You have the floor.
Président, je voudrais...
Thank you, President. I don't wish to extend this meeting too much longer. And I did hesitate a great deal before asking to speak again. I hesitated because I can feel the anxiety, the revulsion from Miss Grevitsky. I listened to her. I listened very carefully to what she said, and I listened very respectfully to what she said. But the suffering that she is enduring does not allow her within this council to do what she did. That is to say, to upset the members of this council, in spite of what she has been through, in spite of all of her suffering, in spite of everything. That does not allow her or authorize her to upset the members of the council, to cause discomfort among members of this council when a member of this council is giving a statement. I don't wish to respond directly to to what was said by the representative of Israel. Simply, I just wanted to say that I regret that 2 days ago there were 20 people killed. When there was a bombing that was authorized by the Israeli army, including 5 journalists who died. And this includes poor Miriam. There were also humanitarian workers. There were ambulance workers. Not one word was uttered for those 20 victims, 20 human lives. Human lives that were cut short. They had families, they had children. Not one word of regret was uttered, at least before this council. I don't wish to extend the meeting any further. This meeting has been painful for us all, because we all felt, beyond our country's positions, we all felt a deep feeling of